It's your question.
Thank you. I'd just like to talk a little bit before I move on to managed migration, which is obviously the thing on everybody's minds at the moment, just about the stability of the existing system. Now, I know you've talked already about how you want rollout to be at such a speed that the system can cope, etc., which is great. How do you feel generally about the stability of the system, and whether, you know, your weekly figures that you get from Peter, that you are content that the system is coping at the moment before we even think about managed migration?
So what I have learnt in my 4 weeks here is the scale and ambition of universal credit is enormous. Enormous in its good intentions, but enormous also in its practical changes that it's making. And, you know, government sometimes is not as good as it should be at rolling out hugely ambitious new changes. So it is coping, but we are only at the foothills in some respects. So I'm cautious about saying it's coping well enough to be absolutely clear about how successful it's going to be in the next few years. So I hope we're going to make steady, careful steps, checking all the time as we embark on this ambitious programme.
And just to build on that, because I mean, actually, next year is a challenging delivery year for us on universal credit, ahead of doing managed migration. But we're currently at around 1.4 million claimants, and that will rise by the end of next year into early 2020 to 3 million. And that's because we've now rolled it out to every job centre, and that means that every new claim and every change of circumstances into universal credit rather than the legacy system. So even ahead of managed migration, next year is a challenge. Next year is a challenge.
I'm asking the question.
But Peter, what the Secretary of State told us this morning, in a sense, is ahead of you, isn't it? She's watching very carefully. So although you're reciting these figures, we'll have these things done by this date, which is what this committee has been arguing with the department. Please do not be governed by these arbitrary targets, whatever happens. Secretary of State's been telling you, via us, that she's not happy with that system. She's going to look very, very carefully. And wouldn't it be better for the officials in the department to stop talking about these goals and adopt the Secretary of State's mode of discussing? This is actually going to be people-led and not figures-led.
Well, absolutely. This is completely people-led. And, you know, the time I spend at job centres with work coaches, seeing the way that they provide a tailored relationship with each claimant, this feels, it feels on the ground very people-led, just as much as when I'm sort of sitting over in Caxton House.
But if you start, it's going to be 3 million by then, those people on the ground are pressurised in a way that the Secretary of State doesn't wish them to be.
That's not what I'm saying at all, Mr. Chair. I mean, what I'm saying is that when you look at the forecasts for new claims into universal credit, now as of last week, we've rolled the last job centre into universal credit. So all new claims are into universal credit. And that means when you just look at the forecast of new claims into working age, they're now, with a few exceptions, all into universal credit. You can see that build-up. And what that means is that we need to make sure that we're putting in place all of the system changes, all of the automation, to make sure that each and every one of those people coming into universal credit has the best possible experience, which is why things like payment timeliness is so important. And despite the fact that we've seen the volumes of people in universal credit go up from something like 500,000 to 1.4 million over the course of the year that we've just coming to an end, we've seen payment timeliness go up from 77% to above 85%. It was 83% when I was last in the committee in October, and it's gone up since then, despite the increase in volume. So, you know, all of that is down to hard work and focus. But I'm answering Ms. Allen's point. I'm absolutely focused on delivering for our people, for our customers over the course of 2019, where the volume step up again.
Then? So this, we're talking a lot about big volume here. Can it cope with the volume? Because we know there's a lot of manual processing still behind. It's not just the work coaches, it's the processing centres behind the scenes that I think struggle the most. Amber, how in the detail do you feel yet? Because one of the things I think that struck this committee is because UC is taking so long to roll out, some of the bugs you don't know about until you get there because you're pushing more people through the system. You wrote to us last week about this Christmas issue of where some people, their employer might pay them early over Christmas, how the system can cope with 2 payments in a month. I'd like you to talk us through that, whether that's just a gift for Christmas or whether that is something that will help with that issue all year round. And secondly, just another bug, people pay housing rents, social housing, weekly. Universal credit is monthly. Every 5 or so years, there are 53 weeks in the year, which renders for those tenants, they go 1 week without rent. So there are still bugs in the system. It's not just about big volume and processing. How in the detail do you feel on that yet, Amber?
I would say I'm making progress. If I may, I'm going to answer this question, but if I may, to Mr. Chairman's point, is that it's right to have goals, but I will be on top of making sure that problems don't emerge that we don't address, and if we need to, slow down. And as I said earlier, I'm particularly concerned about how long it may take to get people who are more vulnerable onto UC and making sure that they are handheld onto it so we don't miss anybody between systems. And we will see how that goes over the next few months, but I'm absolutely alert to that. Second, on the Christmas issue, yes, I mean, I this was signalled to me and by MPs. Actually, I've been having a series of meetings with MPs, and so I spoke to the Treasury to ensure that they spoke to HMRC to ensure that businesses were alert to the changes they need to make in order to make sure that when the payment is made pre-Christmas, the individual doesn't lose their UC. It's very simple, but it's a responsibility of employers to make sure that they do that. So I wrote out to MPs to make that clear so that if it should occur, if there are individuals, constituents who come to see them and say, it's a disaster, I've been cut off UC, we can have it corrected, and HMRC are alert to it. So I hope I addressed that one.
Is employers' responsibility? Because it's all to do with the date of the payment, isn't it? That they
payments, they make them in certain ways, and there are certain boxes to tick as part of the HMRC responsibility that they have, and normally they do. And I know that the Holyrood case has been brought up before, and that is one where it didn't take place. I don't want that to happen again. So that's why I hope got on the front foot to speak to Mel Stride at Treasury, who spoke to HMRC to ensure that there's coverage here. One of the things I hope I can bring is I have a good relationship with many of the ministers to address these things as quickly as possible.
Do you think that will fix the issue all year round? Because this can be an issue for people in variable work, that 1 month, they get paid twice, brilliant, and then next month, nothing. And that bounces people in and out of UC. Will this proactivity through HMRC, will that fix it?
Absolutely will. It just makes it particularly relevant over Christmas. But usually it does work. I mean, but as is so often the case with UC, overall it works. It's just there are a few people who get caught out in the side of it, and that's what I need to address.
Does have any role in this if the employer still doesn't do what they're supposed to? The work coach should be the buddy to that claimant and say, yeah, I can see what's happened with your wages. So they will have some proactive ability to do that.
Coaches are aware of this as well.
To 53-week rent issue.
So on top of that, I have to say.
But I think part of that is about the engagement we have with landlords to change the way that works.
Housing tenants, housing associations, council house rents are weekly.
Not in every case, I think, but
in Birkenhead they are.
I imagine weekly, even if it's on a basis of 4 weeks. I think 2019-20 will be a 53-week year.
Next year will be.
I think previous indications from the department have been that they won't cover that extra week of rent, which will just put people into more arrears through no fault whatsoever of their own, because universal credit is paid monthly. It just seems that it's designed to put people into more debt from which they will struggle to get out. So if you could have a look at it again.
Well, we can write to you, but it's certainly not designed to put people into rent arrears in that way at all.
Paying 52 instead of 53 weeks when it's a 53-week year will do that.
But I agree, and we will address it. And I will come back to you on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's quite a few like that.
Chris, and then back to Heidi.
Well, if I could just ask you, Secretary of State, I mean, you seem to be aware that there's problems at Christmas time. So can I ask why the department is taking the decision for universal credit claimants to remove the £10 Christmas bonus?
So the £10 Christmas bonus was paid to a certain group of people who were receiving benefits. It wasn't paid, and it never was paid, to everybody who would be eligible for universal credit. The people who did receive it before are still receiving it. It just hasn't been extended to everybody in receipt of universal credit.
This way.
Well, yes, effectively it is. But people who were used to receive it still get it. So people who want ESA, etc.
Well, from one of your ministers saying that they are going to scrap it.
It's been phased out, as Mr Chairman said, in a way, but it hasn't just suddenly been... I understand that there was the same campaign last year when it wasn't paid either to people who had been moved onto universal credit.
A benefit that's stayed at the same rates as 1972, as a Christmas bonus has. Would the department not looking at the actual rate of payment for that? Because Christmas is is a time when people are struggling.
I understand that. Of course, in a few years' time, 50% of people who are on universal credit will be in work. So it's not just people who aren't in work who receive universal credit. But as I say, at the moment, new applicants to universal credit don't get it. The people who are, which is the majority of people who did get it, do still get it.
Heidi?
If we could take you away from the bugs in UC.